Deirdre P. Brown at Gmail.
Yes, thank you. Let me see what I already got that. 1 second. You need to. I took it.
What are you using? Is that an L or an I?
An I. Yes.
I don't know. I just copied and pasted it.
What's that second dash?
FL. What's a lowercase L? Lowercase L. Capital T.
Okay. Is everybody logged on, ready? Do you need another couple minutes?
I need a couple minutes. I'm not going to have much luck with the no.
Do you know if that's an I or an L?
It's an I, capital I.
What's the second digit of the password?
Capital I.
So it's F capital I.
F, capital I, capital
We're working on it. Okay.
420. Oh, double it.
That's part of the capital I. I didn't even see that. That's an alpha.
I didn't know.
I'm getting it. I can't open the email to copy and paste because I'm not logged in.
You might still have it at let's see if we can figure out what letters to
Did it work? Mine worked.
Yeah, it worked.
I'm just.
Okay, so. Yes. I'm doing something spacey. I don't know what. And then it's lowercase f, capital I.
Andrea, did you do a grants report? No? Okay. Let's try to do that for next month. I was looking back. Thanks.
I don't know.
There we go. You're in.
I did the December minutes.
More important is the
It's always not on paper.
Hey, you on?
Sorry,
I think that one
doing
is
that.
We're in.
email.
Good turnout. Glad to see everybody made it. Okay, ready?
I can't get in. I'll just peer over somebody's shoulder.
Melanie, did you send out all the documents?
Mm-hmm.
Is that okay? So
What's this from?
Yeah.
That's DPR. That's DPR.
DPR.
Can we tell them that they're on paper?
Hmm?
No.
Okay.
Why not?
All right, let's get started.
Yeah.
I'm going to call the meeting to order. Rachel, are we on? Okay. So welcome everyone. This is the January meeting of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 3F. I want to welcome everyone to our new meeting location here at UDC. I'm glad to see everybody, or maybe not everybody, maybe there are people wandering around outside, but at least you folks made it and found the room. So thanks for being here. First order of business is a roll call to establish the quorum. So why don't we start? Actually, before we do that, I wanted to welcome our two new commissioners. We have two commissioners newly elected for this term. We have Deirdre Brown from 3F04 and Naima Rutenberg from 3F03. So welcome to both of them. So Shirley, why don't you start?
I'm Shirley Adelstein, 3F2.
Naomi Rettenberg, 3F03.
Pat Jakopchik, 3F07.
I'm Maliki Nugent. I'm 3F06 and the chair.
David Dickinson, representing 3F01.
Deirdre Brown, representing ANC 3F04.
Andrea Molide, 3F05, Commission Secretary.
Okay, so that's a quorum. We have a quorum being four for the meeting. So next order of business is to approve the agenda. Now we have two agendas. We have a consent agenda, and everything on the consent agenda was circulated a week ago, circulated publicly a week ago. When we approve the consent agenda, everything on that agenda is deemed approved unanimously as well. So we had five items on the consent agenda: approval of the Q4 financial report, resolution to participate in ANC 2017 Security Fund, resolution establishing the ANC 3F 2017 meeting dates, a resolution electing the ANC 3F 2017 officers, and the resolution establishing ANC 3F 2017 committee assignments. So are there any comments or edits or amendments to the items on the consent agenda?
I have an amendment to the soapstone Sure. I have an amendment to the Soapstone and Melvin Hazen committee membership list. I need to add a name. It's former Commissioner Mary Beth Ray. She'll be active as a citizen member of our committee with full voting rights. I'm going to accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay. Actually, I accept that as a friendly amendment.
Isn't it my isn't my resolution?
No, it was my
Oh, sure.
resolution.
Okay.
I second both of my friends.
Okay, any other amendments to the items on the consent agenda? All right. So all in favor of the consent agenda with that one amendment?
Aye.
Opposed? None. So it passes 7-0-0. And then motion to approve the regular agenda. And unfortunately, we don't have copies in the room of the regular agenda, but Andrea wrote it up there on the board. You can see it. Any changes or amendments to the regular agenda, commissioners? Anything?
I'm sorry, actually, with regard to item number 12, which is an update on the Hearst Park project, just for the record, it's, and correct me, Peter, your last name again is Jordan?
Norden, with an N.
Norden. So rather than Jackie Stanley from DGS giving us an update on the park project, Peter Norden from DPR will be providing that update.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so all in favor of the agenda? Aye. Passes 7-0-0. Great. So now we'll move to the first item on the regular agenda, which is a greeting from our new hosts, UDC. And Michelle, if you'd like to take the floor.
Thank you for coming here. And I'd just like to say President Mason really wanted to be here tonight to welcome you all on the first meeting of your new location for your ANC meetings. But he was sick all weekend, and he came in and out today, and he said it might be better if I don't go. You all might be glad. He might have been spreading germs, but don't tell him I said that. But I'd like to extend on the behalf of President Mason and the University of the District of Columbia a welcome to our home here. Our home is your home. We've been working diligently to make it comfortable for you. Please let Malachi know anything you need, and we're working closely with him to accommodate your needs. So thanks for coming, and we look forward to housing you here at UDC.
Thank you. Great. So now we'll move to the next item, which is commissioner announcements and updates. Start with you, Shirley. Nothing? Anything?
Yeah, I just have one on behalf of former ANC Commissioners Mary Beth Ray and Sally Gresham. They are delighted to report, as I am as well, that after almost a year, a new sidewalk and curb have been built on Albemarle and 32nd Street. Special thanks to DTOT's Suzette Robinson and Leon Anderson for their responsiveness. This sidewalk repair was item 1 on the December resolution, and there are 11 more items which we are continuing to work on. And stay tuned for what we hope will be a progress report next month.
Great. I have two announcements. The first is that last week a raise permit was filed for the structure at 4111 Connecticut Avenue. Some of you might know that as the building next door to the building that's been under construction for quite some time. It turns out that the owner of 4111, for which the new permit has been filed, is teaming up with the owner of 4113 to do a two-lot project. And they're in the very early stages, and they're just meeting with architects now. You know, as by law, anyone has 90 days to file a historical preservation objection to the raising of that property. The raising is still many months away, as I would imagine the permitting process and the eventual construction are as well. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about that project and seeing the other property on that block managed as well. Also, I wanted to give a quick bit of recognition to all of the volunteers who came out this past Monday to clean up Soapstone Park. We had an event with the Rock Creek Conservancy, and while I was not able to attend, I was told 60 volunteers were there, and we cleaned up 90 bags of trash from the park. I want to give a special recognition to John Mallory from the Rock Creek Conservancy, Ian Maggard from the Mayor's Office, and our own Bill Siddick from our committee on Soapstone and Melvin's Hazen for making this great event possible. We're really looking forward to taking care of these gyms in our neighborhood a bit more, and we look forward to working with the Mayor's Office on a monthly cleanup in the near future.
David, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I've got 3 or 4 announcements. I've been pegged as the one that talks a lot during this 20-minute community announcement, so I'll follow suit. First, again, I wanted to thank UDC, given that it's in my single-member district. I have a particular affinity to it, and so thank you, Ms. Brousseau, for the formal welcome, and we hope it's a lasting, long partnership. So thank you. Speaking of UDC, the UDC Community Campus Task Force held its quarterly meeting last week on the 11th. This task force grew out of a zoning commission order from 2011 that addressed the planned new student center at the time, along with some certain off-campus student housing issues. The task force is now re-energized and is facing some great new opportunities with the community and UDC in order for UDC to become an even greater presence in our community and asset. Given this involved role, the task force discussed both physical development and budget issues last week. An initial report was given about the recent acquisition of the Fannie Mae property at 4250 Connecticut Avenue. That acquisition was by the Bernstein Development Company. UDC is on ongoing negotiations with Bernstein with the hopes of entering into a long-term lease of the property for both student housing and commercial opportunities in a mixed-use type building. Both ANC 3F and Van Ness Main Street are represented on the task force and have expressed a strong interest in staying very informed about the process and planning of the 4250 Connecticut Avenue site. The task force was also briefed about the UDC proposed budget for FY18. I think further details about the budget, I believe, are on UDC's website, and the task forces continue to stay very involved and educated. And for members of the community that have a place in their heart for UDC, I'd encourage you to take a look at that and see if advocacy is in the cards for you with Mary Che and primarily the mayor for the budget for UDC. I think Ms. Brousseau is going to talk a little bit more about the UDC coming community events, but I particularly wanted to draw attention to an event tomorrow night. I'm sure you'll hit it as well, but there's a pretty neat art cell here on campus across the quad in Building 42 from 6:30 to 8. A lot of their art pieces are all on sale for $20 a piece, and they're all framed, so it's a great deal. And I wish I were in town, but I'm prudently not going to be. This is given that it is a unique week in D.C. And probably the United States and elsewhere. I wanted to let people know that there's a Ball 2020 at Soapstone Market this Friday night. I don't have a lot of details about it. Go by the Soapstone Market. It's a lot of community activists will be there. If you're looking for an alternative that evening, I encourage you to check it out. Councilmember Che's office, I don't know if there's somebody here from her office. You're going to be talking about this Saturday?
Yeah, I think so.
Great. And what's not happening this Friday. And also, just again, in light of the inauguration events in this weekend, I know Michelle will probably hit this, but UDC is also hosting a Progressive Democrats conference this Saturday and a New York Festival of Music on Sunday. Lastly, Rock Creek Conservancy. Thank you, Pat, for helping organize that with the Rock Creek Conservancy and Bill and others. I took my family down to Pierce Mill on Monday, and they had well over 100 participants. Last year they collected 900 pounds of trash. They collected 1,200 pounds this year, and I'm guessing a lot more was picked up later by the Park Service. So job well done. Thanks, guys.
I just have 2 issues to report on. Both were started by my predecessor regarding Forest Hills Playground. The first one is the LED lights are supposed to come on from dusk to dark, had gone out and were not working. DGS did come out and fix that, and the lights are now working. They had to replace a panel. Apparently there was an electrical problem. So that issue has been resolved. But the other issue that has not been completely resolved is there is a chalkboard there that was deteriorating, was beginning to fall over, presenting a danger. Sally Grisham informed DGS. They did come out and re-secure it. However, there is some question about whether that should be removed because it's really a chalkboard made for interior spaces and not exterior spaces. So I have had a phone call with Frank Maduro at DGS. We talked about it on the phone. He's going to meet me at the playground. We're going to take a look at it and see if we can't come up with something that's mutually agreeable and safe for everyone. I'll report back next month.
Andrea? Nothing? Okay, and I just want to draw people's attention to the fact that snow season is starting, and the city does have a requirement that people and businesses shovel their sidewalks within 8 hours of the end of major snow. But also that there is an exemption for people over 65 and people with disabilities who live in their own homes. So if you're in either of those categories, you should go to the DPW website, sse.dcdpw.us, and apply for the exemption. That's all.
I did have one, but I forgot it.
You forgot?
Yes.
Next month.
So
Next month.
it's just a quick reminder, quick reminder that this Friday at 4 p.m. there's a teach-in at Politics and Prose. The topic is women's rights. And so that's also an alternative Friday activity. That's it.
Okay. So now we'll move on to committee reports. Start with Parks and Trails.
The Parks and Trails Committee met last Monday at the Forest Hills of D.C. During that, we laid out, we actually took a look back and we talked about the work we've done. We're currently in the midst of preparing a report on the activities that we've undertaken since starting our committee. Very happy with the progress we've made and look forward to making more. We hope to have that report completed and voted upon at our next meeting for distribution at the general ANC meeting in February. We also ratified our new membership and our meeting schedule. We will continue to meet on the first Mondays of every month at 7 p.m. Currently, those meetings are at the Forest Hills Home in the conference room. And then we also finalized our committee structure to focus on the Soapstone Sewer Rehab project, the partnerships and our projects and partnerships, which we're considering enlarging to take on some grants in the area, and continuing our focus on mitigating stormwater runoff problems in both of our parks. So if you're interested, we'd love to have you. It is open to commissioners and the public alike. I would like to welcome my new colleagues on this commission to our subcommittee as well. So thank you.
Okay, moving to Streets and Sidewalks Committee. We still have not had a meeting in several months, but I want to introduce Bob Daling, who is going to be the new chair of that committee. Thank you for taking that on. And then working with Bob, we will set a meeting schedule and other administrative items for the coming year for the Streets and Sidewalks. Okay. And then grants, we have no report at this point for the Grants Committee, so we'll move on. Moving on to Community Open Forum. This is an opportunity for anybody who has an issue they wish to raise with the public to come on up to the microphone and do so. We ask you to keep your comments restricted to things that are not on the agenda, not elsewhere on the agenda. Floor is open.
Hoffman. I want to bring up the issue of rock concrete of Forest Hills Park, which I think is taken for granted in this area. I've worked a little bit since I've lived here with Sally Gresham, and I have to say that without her constant efforts and those of Mary Beth Ray, things would not move along in the park. Repairs, maintenance, everything from A to Z. Now that they're both gone, okay, let's say it fell on Commissioner Brown and Commissioner Rudenberg, but it should not fall on two people to shoulder this, because this is a resource for the neighborhood. Many people come there. Many people play tennis. Many people play ball there. Many people play basketball there. Many dog walkers are there every day. Many people take their children there, and yet there is no friends group. The friends of the playground have come and gone, and I feel that the abutting neighbors, and particularly those in the larger buildings, should be involved in some way, and I think the ANC has to get behind an effort like that, because otherwise it's not going to get done. It needs a push, and you can't have just a commissioner by themselves or two calling and agitating and being on the phone all day long with the various departments that have to take care of things. So this is a plea for the ANC to get behind this very valuable open space and resource of this neighborhood.
Thank you. Point well taken.
Good evening, everybody. It's Teresa from Van Ness Main Street, and I just wanted to welcome our new commissioners, and we're really looking forward to working with them. I wanted to mention to you that our next Jazz at VN event is going to be February 23rd. Look on our website, which is vannessmainstreet.org, for location. We're working on the next Upper Northwest Arts Forum. Last year we had the first Arts Forum for all types of artists in this part of the district who don't usually get a chance to meet together, and so we'll be setting a date for that. And again, thanks to everyone who helped on the cleanup. If you look at our Facebook page and our Twitter account, we posted pictures of the many people who did a lot of work yesterday, so it was great. We're also working on the design work at the Albemarle corner. I know many of you have seen the changes. The next phase is to get new signage and lighting, so that will be something that will be coming up soon. And again, I just want to plug that if you check our website, vannessmainstreet.org, we post all of the activities that are happening in Van Ness, including things at UDC, things that are happening at the Performing Arts Center at UDC, some of the specials that our businesses are doing, as well as all of our meetings, our Economic Development Committee meeting, our Design Committee meeting, and our Events Committee meeting. And if you're interested in sitting on one of those committees, I'd love to talk with you, and I'll be here tonight right there. So love to see you, and again, check out our website, check out our Facebook page. Thanks.
Thanks, Teresa.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Michelle Pouchot from University of the District of Columbia. Just to add a few things to events that Teresa mentioned. As David talked about, there's an art sale tomorrow night, 6:30 in the building just next door. There's supposed to be about hundreds of works, some that are really fabulous. They wouldn't let me have an advanced preview of it, so I'll be there at 6:30 trying to get something for $20, so it should be really nice. There are several activities at the UDC Theater over the next month: Washington Performing Arts, the Vocal Arts DC, and the Young Concert Artist Series, all of which are performing in the theater while the Kennedy Center is under construction. So the first one is this Sunday. The New York Festival of Song will be there at 3 o'clock. On February 2nd, the Danish String Quartet will be in the theater at 8 p.m. That's a Thursday. On Tuesday, February 7th, the Young Concert Series will host Samuel Hesselhan. And then finally on Saturday, February 11th, there'll be another performance from Washington Performing Arts. You can find those either on the calendar on the UDC website or on the website of those particular venues. And also just want to let you know that UDC will be hosting women's and men's basketball over the next month. On the 28th, we'll be hosting Queens, New York. On the 11th, we'll be hosting NYIT. And then on the 18th, our women's and men's basketball will be hosting Mercy. And those teams are doing really well, so we'd love for you to come out and cheer for our athletes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michael Porcello. I'm from Councilmember Shea's office. I just wanted to follow up on what the Commissioner mentioned about an event this Saturday that Councilmember Shea will be hosting in our office after the Women's March. It is from 1 to 4 p.m., so it should be after the march concludes. It'll be in Suite 108. The Councilmember will be there, a couple members of staff. I believe there'll be light refreshments. And if you, it's in Suite 108 at the Council Building. So, at the Wilson Building. And I believe the front, if you walked by the building, the front is closed off right now for a booth for the event, but if you go around the back, I believe that should be open during the day to get in. And feel free to reach out to our office if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ian Maggard. I'm the Ward 3 liaison for Mayor Bowser's office. Just a quick announcement. I think everyone knows there's an inauguration on Friday. Wanted to share with you that DC has set up a website, inauguration.dc.gov, to share information about road closures, official inauguration events, and any thing that you do's and don'ts of the inauguration. So, yeah, visit that if you're heading downtown anytime after tomorrow. So, thank you.
Hi, so I'm Brian Doyle. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Ward 3 Wilson Feeder Education Network. We're a collection of members of PTA boards, members of local school advisory teams, so parents and community members who advise principals on budgets and other issues related to schools, and then just interested community members who are looking to support one another as schools in the Wilson Feeder pattern, to advocate on behalf of better schools all around the city, and to host community events. And on that note, I wanted to make two announcements. First of all, on January 31st at the Georgetown Library at 7 o'clock, we'll be hosting State Superintendent for Education Hensel Kang. For those unaware, the State Superintendent's Office deals with such issues as testing in the district, so the test that often people refer to as PARC, or implementation in the district of the federal Every Student Succeeds Act, and even things like DC TAG, which is the program by which families in the District of Columbia can get up to $10,000 to cover part of the cost between the difference of in-state and out-of-state tuition at any state school around the country. Later on in February 23rd, we'll be actually hosting Councilmember Che to restart a conversation about capacity in schools in the Wilson Feeder Network. As many of you may know, class sizes have risen. Many of these schools have gotten quite big, and as Scotty might say, the laws of physics may not hold, and what might DCPS and what we as community members can brainstorm about solutions to try and get around some of these problems. So hope to see you. That second one actually is at 6:45 at the Tenley Friendship Library on February 23rd. Thank you very much.
Brian, thank you for coming tonight. I also just want to acknowledge that Brian and his wife, Liz Stewart, are incredibly involved in educational issues, and I just wanted to thank you on behalf of the ANC. I know Liz Stewart actually was the first PTA president the prior 2 years. I just wanted to acknowledge that.
A hard act to follow.
Yeah, wow. not really. But let me mention, just since you're in the room with Michelle and the UDC task force, and I mentioned the budget efforts that UDC is facing, that I've learned more and more how UDC is a true asset for the high school and elementary school kids, frankly, of DC. So I would encourage you to come to one of our task force meetings and learn more and maybe share some ideas about, I forget what the name of the program is, maybe it's DC UPS or some program that allows the valedictorians and other high-achieving students from DC Public Schools a full scholarship here at UDC. I also want to let you know that we still have, I think it's next month probably now, the public space permit for Merge. And we're very well aware of the capacity issues, and I know some of that's being addressed down toward Hardy, but I think that I encourage you and Mary Che to think about the capacity issues, which I'm sure you're very well aware of, up this area as well. But I don't know if anybody else has any.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to make an announcement or discuss an issue with the community? Okay. All right, thank you. So moving on, we're going to move to a discussion of CVS and the DEC digital sign regulations with Garrett Weitzcarver of DCRA. And then, Shirley, do you want to introduce the issue first?
So I would like to welcome Mr. Weitzcarver. He's the illegal construction manager for DCRA. And the reason we've invited him here today is to help educate the ANC and also answer community questions about regulations pertaining to digital signs. What has motivated us to consider this issue is the digital sign that was attempted to be built at CVS right across the street. Some of you might have seen a big gray tarp covering it, and it's flanked on either side by bright orange stop work orders. So the company that has tried to build that, arguably illegally, has also done so elsewhere in the city, and there is the possibility of some legislation in the city council that Councilmember Evans is interested in introducing that could potentially, for instance, grandfather in such construction. So we felt that it was important for us to educate ourselves about these regulations, and we are extremely fortunate to have Mr. Weitzcarver here, who is truly the city's expert on this. So I did send a few questions in general to get us started, but then please feel free, everyone, to chime in. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. That's a scary thought. I didn't realize the city expert.
If you could come over to here.
Well, I didn't get a feeling that was really working, so
It's for our audience watching at home.
Oh, you've got a
It's
camera. I was
broadcasting.
going to say, I thought maybe we should be presenting a film today. This is, as you can imagine, being from DCRA, I get to attend quite a few ANC meetings throughout the city.
Can I ask you to spell your name, please?
Weitzcarver. It's the spelling is, well, here you go.
Okay.
Anyone else needs to know, I've got some business cards. But I get to attend quite a few of these, and I can say unequivocally that this is the best venue I've seen for an ANC meeting. So whoever did the scouting, congratulations on that one. Yes, I'm here to discuss a little bit on sign regulations. A few of the planted questions, if you will, from Shirley were that essentially what regulation controls signs, and that's in the DCMR Title 12. It's Appendix N. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the DC regulations, all of them are essentially available online using the DCRA website. You just go on to dcra.dc.gov, and you look for building codes and regulations, and just drill down, and you'll find the District of Columbia Municipal Regulation Title 12, and Appendix N covers signs. I did bring along, probably 8 or 9 copies of it for those of you that might be particularly interested. Digital signs are a unique animal within the code. Now this code, this particular code, I did research back into about the 60s, hasn't changed. All right, there's been the same regulation for a long time. It's had some few additions, but it hasn't changed much in its primary regulations for quite some time. Digital signs, because of that, how many of you remember signs that essentially rotated? Went like at a triangular thing, and it would flip around and rotate around. Well, that was one early form, kind of an analog sign of digital, where the message changed, but it only had like 3 options, right? It went around 3 times, and boom, you had all 3 messages. Well, that is rotating signs, and that essentially digital signs are considered a rotating sign by this regulation. Anything that's in 3D animated, where the message changes. Those signs are very limited, very controlled. The way the company that was mounting the sign, and CVS being an example, was the reason they put that up was they were trying to say that there's a loophole in the code that makes that sign not require a permit. Well, that was a little bit of a stretch. The court through Superior Court did not support that notion. There is further litigation going on for a permanent injunction, but we won on the preliminary injunction to keep the sign from being activated, so that's why it's covered right now. Signs, you'll see there's probably at least 4 or 5 different regulations that they've essentially violated by putting that sign up. So there's quite a bit that in size, position, the fact they need a permit, the message changing, lots of different things. You'll notice around the district, with very few exceptions, signage relates to what's going on at that particular property. So in other words, Verizon Center, they have digital signs up, but those digital signs actually are supposed to only give messages for things that are actually offered inside the Verizon Center. So things like, Tahiti vacations, unless there's a travel agency inside the Verizon Center that offers those kind of things, that would not be a permitted sort of messaging. The type of signage that was attempted would have been your standard Las Vegas type of signage, advertising Coca-Cola and all that stuff. So a lot of different ways these things would be not within regulation or within code. Any other basic questions?
Could you talk a little bit? You mentioned that the company Digimedia was trying to argue that there were some loopholes, and I was interested to know if your perception is that because the law is somewhat antiquated, whether there are ambiguities that might need to be clarified? There
really isn't. It's one of those, it was a legal ploy, and it's still got some degree of court action that may occur. But essentially they were trying to make the argument that within a building, the regulations essentially will exempt signs within a building. So if we've got, this is got a venue of some sort inside this building, we would exempt a sign in here. It can't be seen from the public. It can't be seen across the street. It's basically inside the building. It's like having a menu at McDonald's. We're not going to regulate that sign, right? So within a building, they were trying to suggest in the case that within a building would include things within the footprint of a building. So if you had a building where the front entryway was actually recessed from the edge of the building, which you see in a lot of buildings, that anything that within the outside footprint of that building would have been exempt, and so I can put anything up I want. Well, so that didn't pass muster so far. We still have another court case to go. But so that was the basis of their argument, that it would exempt from code because of that. The code official gets, by virtue of law, code official gets a little bit of deference, if you will, to making interpretive decisions of our own codes. And our interpretive decision has been that within a building is just that, within a building. So in other words, you can exempt a sign when it's inside this building. But just because this building is recessed from the street doesn't give you an out. If it's on the outside of the building and it's facing the street, it's a sign as far as we're concerned. So there really isn't. There's an emergency legislation that's before City Council, or will be soon, that essentially tries to clarify, if you will, what our position is, and that is that to be exempt, it's got to be inside the building. And we've actually gone a little step further, because the next thing would be for these people that are motivated with commercial interests, obviously, is to, even if they were back inside the building, you can imagine some of these businesses along the street that have nothing but glass windows, right? Well, if they could convince somebody that owns that business to mount a sign, a digital sign, across the entire face of that building and be 18 inches inside the glass, they say, well, I'm exempt again, I'm inside the building. Well, we know that you're intending to essentially broadcast your message through that glass and become one big, huge billboard sign down at street level. And so the emergency legislation is essentially trying to clarify that, to says, hey, if you can see that sign from off the premises, then it's still considered a sign that requires a permit.
So I have two questions. One was going to be about the emergency rulemaking. Can you talk about the status of that legislation, where it currently stands? And the other question I had is, my understanding is that the issue that we have had with the digital sign across the street has actually occurred in a very similar way throughout the city. Is that right? How many stop work orders like ours have you issued?
There was roughly 50 sites that were targeted. I think 30 of them, or roughly around 25 to 30 of them, were actually initiated, and I think there's somewhere around 20 that were actually had signs put up. Now, there are multiple signs up at some of those locations, so there are quite a few signs up. There's 6 signs up on one location, so there's quite a few. As far as the status of the City Council's hearing, I honestly don't know where that's at in the calendar. I don't know. Perhaps somebody else may, but I don't know. I can have Matt Orleans can probably track that down for you.
I have a question about our sign in particular, and the question of it, the permitting on why it wouldn't qualify. Is it
CVS?
Yeah, I'm sorry, the
Okay.
CVS. Is it a question of content, a question of the methods it's using?
It's primarily right now it's size and location. If you look at the regulations on revolving signs, again, you can grab those off the table there later today if you like. There are limitations in terms of dimensions. The area of revolving sign, and again, it's a little bit of a misnomer calling it a revolving sign, but it's a digital sign, is limited to 40 square feet. Well, that thing is a heck of a lot bigger than 40 square feet, with a maximum dimension of 3 feet. So, in any one direction. So try and figure that one out. It's 40 feet per face, and a maximum dimension shall not exceed 3 feet. There's a revolving sign limitation that must be 8 feet above the adjacent ground level. Well, that one's right basically at ground level. There are some content issues as well, but those we are, because of a recent Supreme Court case, we've kind of held back on citing for content issues. We're just hitting them for the basic physical dimensions and locations.
Thank you.
Because in a historic district, they'll never. Some of these signs actually popped up in historic districts, and the historic people will never let that go. I mean, it's hard to establish a digital sign as being anywhere near historic, right?
Thank you for coming and explaining some of this to us. I think it was a bit of a surprise to us when that sign did pop up at CVS. What I hear you saying, though, is that if the size and the position requirements are met, then they could get the permit.
Yes, some signs could be permittable. They've got a couple of locations that might have been successful had they sought a permit. But you get into all these regulations in terms of the size limitations. At some point, the rules about content might even kick in.
So my concern is that digital signs, when you go to places like the Verizon Center or other places, if you ever travel in Asia where they have these enormous digital signs along the highway, They're really bright, they're very obtrusive, and they certainly get your attention. And that's great, that's what they're supposed to do. But there's a qualitative difference, obviously, between that and one of those little revolving flip signs. So my question for you is there any provision for public input to the permitting process for these types of signs, given that they are so qualitatively different? They're bright, they're really very obtrusive on the landscape in a way that a flip sign is not. And if there's nothing like that in the legislation now, is it possible for something like that to be amended into the emergency legislation?
Well, probably not into the emergency legislation because of the process it would have already had to go through to get there through city administrator's office and all that. However, that being said, the regulations for signage are currently under revision and actually have gone through at least 2 public comment periods already. And I know they're beefing up this section specifically as far as digital signs. I have not seen the copy yet as far as what the final bill will be like, as far as making it approved from the city council. However, if there were any option of putting public input, I would say to your city council person to essentially indicate your interest in having the city council control the proliferation of digital signs, if that's your preference.
Along the lines of it being an intrusion on the public space in the same way that a sidewalk cafe intrudes on public space, and a sidewalk cafe comes before the ANC for public comment before that's approved. And so by that logic, something as obtrusive as a digital sign may come forward before us as well.
As long as the sign was within all of the criteria that are here, that are currently in the regulation and conceivably in the new proposed regulations, and especially with the emergency rulemaking, there's going to be a huge opposition, at least from the industry side. I mean, huge. Because essentially, if you had a sign, say in the lobby, across the lobby of UDC, where it's 20 feet back from the door, but it's all glass, and they had a big sign advertising, some airways, some airline of some sort, one could, with that current emergency legislation, one could go in and cite them as having to require a permit for that, and then all the sign regulations would kick in. And so assuming that were to be passed by city council, that would be an overriding control of digital signs across the board. Because it makes it clear that you can't see, if you can see the message from outside the property line, it's regulated. And so
that may be something that we want to look into.
Well, I would just make your feelings known to the city council to make sure they understand, because that will come through as a vote as to whether or not it'll pass. And I guarantee you that the sign industry doesn't want to see that happen.
Right. Any other comments before we open it up?
I just have one comment or question about the judicial process and whether the judge there ever asked sort of for a status check, and whether you guys are obligated to sit down with the sign company and or CBS and say, here are the issues, here are some possible options, here's somebody from the ANC that's got an interest, you'll figure it out. Is there that type of process, or is this just here's a regulation, you're in or you're out? And
at the very start of the court case, there was the judge, because it was a preliminary injunction, the judge did say, or the two parties want to get together here. Well, the trouble is that I've got regulations. I don't have the authority under the regulations to start dickering around with the regulations. I can't give you a pass just because we're wanting to get friendly. And so I've got to stick to these regulations. That's my charge under the law. Well, so I've got no give on my end. The other people had already put up millions of dollars worth of signs. There's no give on their end. So it was thrown out there, but it didn't go anywhere.
Okay. Deirdre, Andrea, do you have anything? No. Okay, let's just take a few minutes. If there are any questions or comments from people in the audience for Mr. Weisgarber. Anything? Nothing?
Is there any overlap, you talk about advertising for a third party, so it's not advertising once in the building. Does that bump up at all to billboard regulations, or is there any overlap?
Definitely. There are billboards and special signs, and as you look through the regulations, you'll see there's a difference. Special signs, there's some of these big draping signs that you've seen around town, advertising whatever, possibly just the building they're advertising that they're, for rentals. But special signs were essentially moratoriumed back in 2004, I believe, in that time frame. And so there was no more of those special sign permits were issued in the District of Columbia. And so there are revisions. So you may see a sign that's advertising Coca-Cola or iPhones or something, and those may be allowable as a special sign revision, but the special sign permit for the original sign was something that was granted within these regulations, essentially. So what happened was with the gallery, Verizon Center, and some of these other signs, they essentially went through City Council to get legislation to force it into the codes. All right. So the only reason they're allowed to be there is because City Council essentially made a law that put it into law that they can be there. Well, if you're interested, especially in your areas, of keeping things out in terms of digital signs, you need to make certain that the City Council knows your feelings on it, so that if that ever comes up for a vote, at least your feelings have been heard as far as what you think needs to happen. And then once it's there, I'll enforce it, whatever it is.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right,
Thanks
thank you.
for coming out tonight. Okay. We're going to move on to update on the Hearst Park project proposal with Peter Norden. If you'd like to take a few minutes to introduce the topic.
Sure, let me go ahead and introduce this. Again, normally we would have expected Ms. Jackie Stanley from DGS, who's their communications officer liaison on the project, to present. I think she had planned to be here tonight, and we appreciate you coming out. I think we had also hoped that she would have presented back in December. I think, I don't know if it was the homeless shelter or another issue had come up. But let me just express to you, and maybe you could pass this back both to DGS and DPR, that the ANC is a very vital part of this process, and communication with us will go a long way toward communication with the community. I think a large fraction of the community feels like this hasn't been a completely transparent process, so they're uncertain of the next steps. I know you'll be speaking to that a little bit tonight, but just by way of refresher for the community, this is a renovation of the Hearst Recreation/Park area. If you go to the DGS website, you'll find a description of the project, and I'd just like to quickly read it because there's always seems to be confusion about the scope of it, but this is at least what's stated on the website. The project will include design and construction, including but not limited to new playground area, new tennis courts, renovation or replacement of existing soccer fields, new pool and pool house, ADA renovations to site, stormwater management, remediation of site drainage, runoff, erosion issues, landscaping, fencing, site furnishings, amenities, signage, and landscaping. I believe that was part of the solicitation for bids for the architect, at least with regard to some of the park designs. I'll also remind the community that DGS and DPR held meetings in May, June, and September of 2016. If folks want to get more information about the project, I also just encourage you to Google Northwest Current and Forest Hills Connection and enter in Hearst Park. This Hearst Park issue has been on the table since 2014. There's been a lot of uncertainty as to this process as it's gone through the DC Council and the budget process. But I encourage people to do a little bit of a deep dive and look back, because I know that Adam Tope, the former commissioner of ANC 3C, was part of an informal group that I was also part of back in 2014 that identified a lot of critical needs associated with the park, including a lot of stormwater issues and drainage issues and erosion issues. We also identified the potential for an upgrade to the existing Hearst Rec Cottage, and you may or may not hear that in the survey results tonight. So this has been an issue on our plate for a long time. I also, as a former PTA president, was pretty involved with the renovation of Hearst Elementary, and also included the addition of a middle school-sized gym, thankfully, at Hearst. And I encourage folks that are wondering what's going on at Hearst, whether it's the school or the park, to go have a look. Go have a look at the gym that's now open, and finally as a result of an MOU. That MOU allows community access to the gym in the evenings and on Saturdays. It's very cool. Hearst is becoming a nice community asset, so I encourage you to come out and look. On weeknights at the Hearst playground on the upper soccer field, it's lit. PPA, Stoddard, others are participating. It's becoming a great community asset. If you look at some of the Northwest Current articles, you'll see a vision toward Hearst Park becoming a campus of activity while retaining the what some people call the heritage trees there, retaining the green nature of the area as a park as opposed to a pure recreation center. So that's what's on my plate. That's what's been in my mind this whole time. I understand that there's a group called the Neighbors of Hearst Park that's met with a lot of city council members and the mayor. The mayor has asked ANC 3C and ANC 3F for an opinion about the park, an opinion about the pool. We'll hear more about the survey results and what the community thinks of the pool project. I'm going to be working with the ANC members in the next month or two to either pass a resolution or to think of other opportunities for communicating our sense as an ANC as to the appropriateness of the pool, appropriateness of the other park planning elements, including a follow-up to a resolution passed in the fall about the stormwater and hydrology study. It was represented to me back in September that the architect and DGS had hired a stormwater expert company and that they were commencing a study. I haven't heard anything since that time. Our resolution had asked that we get a monthly update on that. I want to communicate that back to you and to Director Anderson and the head of DGS that we fully expect that. That goes a long way toward giving credibility to the project and confidence in a joint responsibility and a joint communication going forward. I know that's a lot, but I just wanted to set the stage a little bit. Also, I think that we anticipate questions tonight. There'll also be, and not to steal your thunder, I know that the DGS and DPR are planning a community event at Hearst Elementary in early February, which will be another opportunity for all the constituents in the neighborhood to hear more directly about the slides and probably in more full extent at that meeting. Following that, if there's continuing need for dialogue, we may hold a special meeting as an ANC. Again, I haven't talked to the commissioners about that, but at some point pretty soon we're probably going to need to do that to flesh this out and potentially provide an opinion to the mayor and to the council. Thank you. So let me go ahead and introduce Peter Norden, who is a new project manager for DPR and will be overseeing the Hearst project. So welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for anyone who's coming out, particularly for this the Hearst Park. Basically tonight I just want to give you a quick overview. We have had a survey held, and we had about 1,200, just under 1,200 people respond. So it was very, heavily used, which is great, because we really do want to get a sense of the broad community and a wide range of people. So tonight, what this is it's the kind of a preview, but it's a public release of the survey results. I'm going to go through the slides fairly quickly because I know we have limitation of time at the ANC meeting, but that is, like you mentioned, why we're going to hold a community meeting where we can really go into depth, we can really answer a lot of questions, and at that time we could really go into each slide, item by item if there's really major concerns. But tonight we just want to put it out so it's public. Also because we're hoping this week to have it on the DGS website. so that you could actually go at your own leisure on the website and take a look at the results slide by slide. Because there's a lot of information that we put together to try to really gather the community's feeling, everything from the pool to the layout to even the design and aesthetics of what happens at the park. We know how important this is, and that's why we thank you all for taking that survey of those who have. And then we continue to gather data to help guide the final decisions. So again, as an introduction, I'm Peter Norden. I'm a landscape architect with the capital planning team of DPR, and the former project manager from DPR, Marcella, is no longer with DPR. She's moved on to another company, and so I'll be working along with Jackie Stanley and Shirok, who's with the DGS project manager. So they should both be at the community meeting, and so hopefully we can really get to know any of you and answer more of your questions at that time. But we're happy to take. I'm happy to take some of them tonight too. So that.
So if you would take maybe 5 minutes to just run through the presentation quickly, and then we can get to
exactly. So I'll go through the presentation. It's 32 slides, so we won't spend a lot of time on each one. There's a couple where I want to make sure we stop to let you see those. I think some of the ones that are kind of more contested, and that way, if you have questions at the end, I think would be the best time to ask.
Did you say that this slideshow is available on the website?
It will be this week, so hopefully by Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you'll have a copy as well for tonight. Okay, so here's a quick overview. The survey was released in November 15th and concluded November 30th. We received 1,172 responses, and here's some of the key issues. 42% of the respondents live within a half a mile, so almost 50%. 36% live in less than a mile, and another 20% live within 5 miles. Of those, we had 73 who identified as families in the area, 10% empty nesters, and another almost 7% are couples with no children. So it's obviously those who responded seem to be people with families. That's just the demographics. Then we have 906 respondents. So out of the 1,172, not everybody answered every single question. So we had 906 people answer the question about the pool. So 266 people skipped it, as you can see. I guess they're abstaining. So of those that answered the results, the final results we got of those 906 people are that 76% of the people were in favor of the pool, another 9% were against, and then another 14% were undecided.
Those undecided are the ones who skipped?
No, that's some people actually hit undecided,
okay.
And some people skipped the question altogether.
Okay.
Yeah. So, okay.
And let me just call out, I know that there was a question at the initial stages of the survey once it went public, and I know you'll get into this, but that if a respondent chose the no pool option, they were still forced to choose one of the 3 site options. And I'm assuming that you'll go into that more at the community meeting as to how that played out, what remedies were undertaken, who responded before the fix, who responded after the fix, because I think there's some question about the validity of the survey. So I just want to highlight that to you tonight because I think there'll be a lot of questions about that.
That's a good question. So we'll get to that slide in a few minutes here, but the slide referred to is that there were only 3 options given with that the architect had put together, and all 3 of those included a pool. So there was no, I guess there would have only been one layout, which probably wouldn't be too much different from the layout it is now. And I actually have that slide as well, which I'll get to. So the question is, the people who would have had to skip, I guess, if they were, they probably didn't answer it if they were against the pool. But yeah, we'll get into that in the community meeting further, but I'll address it tonight as well.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. So just gender. I'm sorry, this is a little hard to read. I don't know if can we hit off the back ledge here?
Well, let's maybe not delve
Okay, we don't have to go
so
too
much.
far into this.
Yeah.
It'll all be public again, hopefully by
Demographics.
Thursday. This is just demographics, so overwhelmingly female. Again, a lot of these, age range, if you want to get into that, please feel free to do that. Hopefully it'll be up on Thursday. I know it's a short week because of Martin Luther King Day and the inauguration. But our IT has told us that they hope to have it up by Thursday. So some of these are not as controversial. These are just gathering data. So if you want to we can keep going through these, and I'll stop, I guess, when we hit.
Peter, let's go ahead and skip through the sort of the demographics, and just try to hit the.
Okay, well, here's one that might be interesting to people. This one is, do people prefer, and there's a little bit of confusion here, which is, do people prefer artificial? So the way the questions ran is, do you prefer artificial, natural gas, or natural grass, and give us some comments. So because the bottom two are natural grass, just to the right you'll see that the total artificial turf is 34%, but the combined total of both natural grass with comments and without comments is 66%. So overwhelming, the community preferred natural grass. So that's one that's I thought was interesting.
Respondents, right?
Yeah,
not
respondents.
the community.
No, right. Yes, of the 1,172 people. So here's the total tally of the people that responded. Should an outdoor pool and pool house be constructed? You can see the majority did say yes. So these are some more the detailed ones. We probably won't go through. These are just some of the options that people chose if the pool is built. So here I do want to go through these just quickly, just to show you, because that question came up. If there's no pool built, we'll certainly explore it, but the question is that the people did not have this as an option to pick in the concept. So we only gave them 3 concepts, and one of them did not include no pool. So that was to answer your question. So if there's no pool, we'd have to see how much of this would change, other than a lot of remodeling.
I mean, you can break down the data. If a respondent said no pool and then chose an option,
correct,
then you could figure out how many of those options were based on a no pool versus.
Correct. Okay. Yeah, and again, please do take the time to, if you're going to come to the community meeting, which I hope you will, to really, if you want to take an in-depth look at the results on the website, so that you'll have more, data when you ask the questions next month.
Sorry, I think we said to save questions for later, but so this Q11 answer that we just showed there, that's different from the numbers that you gave us on the first page. What's the story there? This says 22% said no, and on the first page you said 9% said no.
Oh, I think they combined the no and the undecided, or the.
No, undecided is here. Q11 says 72 yes, 22 no, 5.3 undecided. And that first page you said 76 yes, 9 no, 14 undecided. Those aren't the same numbers.
76, 72, okay.
Right, and then 22 here and 9 on the front. And then 14 undecided, only 5% here. What's going on?
You're adding the no, you're adding the people who skipped the question into the no on that table. You got 262 no responses. Right. Q11, you have 1,100.
She's saying the yes, it doesn't match up, right? So
no, this is saying no is 262, and that's saying 266 skipped it entirely, so it should be.
So it looks like
this
that.
Is 1164.
Sorry, but
that's a very good point. I'll find out how that tally came up and when this was written. I apologize for any errors, but we'll make sure that those are edited, I guess, before Thursday. So point well taken, though. Thank you.
Can you quickly, I know that we're trying to rush through and also get audience questions. Can you summarize the 3 options,
yes,
the locations, and just general preferences? I think that's Q15. But
yeah, so part of this will, let's go through these. So this is the existing conditions. Let's go through the next. Here's option number 1, which sites the pool to the southernmost part of the property, and the pool house you see as well. So the next one, this option number 2, which is the one that actually got the majority of people preferred this one. This one actually puts the pool closer to the school and community center. And then option 3. Oh, the blue, sorry. So in this picture, it's in the middle top, but that would actually be the western side.
So at the bottom of the, where's Reno? I mean, where's
go back.
Quebec, or no, what street is that? So
Yeah,
Wisconsin
go back
would be
one.
a block north of this
Correct,
picture.
yeah. So this-
and Upton is on the right-hand side, and Quebec, I believe, or
Right.
Quebec is on the left.
So yeah,
and
so
Idaho on the south, sort of.
because of the layout of the slide, typically we do north, but in order to make the slide fit landscape-wise, north is to everyone's right, and Wisconsin would be then up at its turn. So
Sure.
yeah, and it does have a north arrow actually. If you look to the bottom right here, so when you're looking at that, just try to orientate yourself or turn the paper. Sorry, it's just that because of the landscape mode, in order to show everything without having, because if you turn it, it will shrink the scale, so that's why. All right, so and then the third option was to put the pool to the east, easternmost, and this actually, I think, got the lowest amount of people responding to this.
I know that I had set one of the ground rules of not asking questions, but I know
Yeah.
you're relatively new to the project, and let me just give you a little bit of historical context. Probably the September meeting and at other public discussions, there's been a lot of concern about the sort of the scale drawing of the pool here and the deck, and so I would encourage you at the community meeting to be well prepared to discuss that, including, is the size of the pool 3 lanes or 6 lanes? What amount of deck surrounds the pool? And compare that to other pool projects in the city? Because I think there's some people will look at that and say, oh, that doesn't seem like it's very intrusive to the park, and others might say, well, no, that's not really accurate. So as people are making decisions and judgments, there are people that don't want a pool, period. There's some that say, well, is it scaled properly? Is it too big for the park? There will be other people that say, well, we need a pool that's 10 lanes because we need to serve all the swimmers in Ward 3.
Right.
So having a thorough description of that pool and what the options are for the size of the pool would be very helpful.
Yeah, and also, so another one, just partly to answer that, is at the community meeting we will have the architects as well, and they will probably be much more familiar with the site than I am to answer the questions way more in detail. And I'll make sure that thank you for the point, but I'll make sure that they can give us reference points. Is it similar to size to Volta or Wilson Pool indoors? Ones that you're familiar with probably in wards 3 and 4 and 2. So that's a great point. Thank you.
Let's jump to your next steps slide, and then we'll ask.
So again, these are a little bit more details about color and things which are not quite as controversial at this point, I think. And again, everyone can look at those on their own time. So next steps, just to give you a quick overview of what we'll be doing. This presentation will be posted on the website, should be by Thursday this week. We will be conducting an in-depth community meeting. In February, we're working with various people within the community to make sure that's set up at a convenient time for hopefully as many people to join us as possible. And so we should have that, I would say by next week, we should have that set. It's just, again, a tough week with the short timeline. Our design team, which is the architects, will perform, they'll actually hire a specialized firm which does hydrology and geology to do a study. Just a background, this would take place no matter what. One of the requirements from DCRA, which we follow completely, is that any projects within the city that disturb soil or grounds within over 5,000 square feet do need to go through stormwater management requirements from the Department of Energy and Environment. And so that basically